know what was so great about the 1990s?
Nokia 3310, Baywatch. You could still get an A86 for 1,500 quid.
Yeah, all that. But what I'm actually talking about is variety, choice, difference. But back in the 1990s, it was still open season. Your hot hatch might have had a turbo 4, but it might have had a screaming natural aspirated VTEC engine as well. And as for coupes, well, that's where stuff really got interesting, as these two cars here can prove.
The FD RX-7 and R34 GTR were two seriously quick coupes fighting it out for your yen in the late 1990s and early 2000s. They might both have had their engines mounted up front, but that's pretty much where the similarities stop, because they look, they sound and they feel like two cars from totally different planets.
Start with the RX-7 because, well, it's a bit of an underdog really, isn't it? And there's another reason, which is I've driven stacks of Skylines. I've never driven one of these before, ever. Now that's a pretty Grand Canyon-sized chasm in my motoring knowledge, and I'm pretty keen to fill it. But before we get to the car, this car, the one that I'm popping my cherry with, let's just recap. So the third generation RX-7, the FD, appeared back in 1992, powered by the legendary 13B rotary. Now the previous FC RX-7 also had a 13B, but for the FD, Mazda really turned the wick up. Where the previous one was a single turbo, this time it had two turbos operating sequentially like a Porsche 959s. So what that means is that at low revs you're only operating on one turbo. Feels good, it's not much lag, the throttle response is clean, pulls surprisingly well. But then you get to 4,000. The second turbo comes in, and stuff out that window starts to get seriously runny.
The first FDs made 255 horsepower in Japanese trim, but by the time this car was built a decade later, that was up to 280 horsepower. But that's not all that makes this car special. This is a Spirit R, the last RX-7 and one of the most desirable of all. There were just 1,500 of these Spirit Rs made, and Mazda threw everything at them. Recaro seats, Bilstein suspension and forged alloy wheels, and an adjustable rear wing. Basically, if you're looking for the ultimate factory stock RX-7, this is it.
So what does it feel like to drive an RX-7 for the first time? Well, I can tell you that this car is even better than I expected. I knew that it would be good, but this thing, I can't believe I haven't driven one before. It's so good. It's as good as anything Porsche was doing in the early 90s. A lot more characterful compared to something like a 968. It feels really tight, really compact. The handling is brilliant, great steering. Corners really flat. This isn't really a coupe, this is a proper sports car, and it ticks every single sports car box. Brilliant driving position, great steering, nice strong brakes, really nice chassis balance, good gear change, and what about that engine? You know, this car gets so much right. It's a travesty that the last one was built 15 years ago and there's really no sign, no concrete sign that Mazda's going to replace it. They keep dropping hints about a new RX-7, about bringing the rotary back, and really I hope they do, because this thing's got so much character. It's got a lot to offer. It'd be great to see another rotary again. quite surprising to learn that Nissan also dabbled with rotary technology, as did a lot of other manufacturers in the early 70s. But it never got past the prototype stage, and as car fans, really, you've got to say that's a good thing, isn't it? Because if they had brought rotaries to market, we wouldn't have got this engine. This is the RB26 Twin Turbo, the legendary straight six that came out in 1989 with the original groundbreaking R32 GTR. That same engine also appeared in the R33 GTR that followed as well, but along the adulation for that car, the acclaim for its 8-minute lap of the Nürburgring, there was some criticism too.
The GTR got too big, too heavy, some people said. So Nissan went back to the drawing board to make something more like the R32. And this is what they came up with. The R34 was shorter, lighter and more focused, but the core ingredients were the same. You still got the Atessa four-wheel drive system, the high-cast four-wheel steer, and you still got the RB26.
As with the R32 and R33, R34s also came in optional V or Victory spec. They're a bit more special than the regular GTRs, limited production. They got stuff like a more sophisticated four-wheel drive system with an active rear limited slip diff, stiffer suspension and aero mods, and then in 2000 the V-Spec 2 appeared. Now that got bigger brakes and a carbon bonnet. But the real show was in 2002. That's when this car was released. This is a V-Spec 2 Nür. Nissan built just over 1,000 Nurs, and the rarest of them are actually the road-biased M-Spec cars. There's just under 300 of those built, but the ones everyone wants now are these. This is a V-Spec, this is a stiffer, more hardcore car. But what they both share is the same really, really special RB26 motor under the bonnet.
All Nurs got Nissan's legendary N1 version of the RB26 straight six, originally designed for competition use. That meant a thick wall block and special N1 pistons, rods, crank and turbos. The list goes on and on. With a nod to the Japanese gentleman's agreement, the N1 cars were still quoted at 280 horsepower against a real figure of around 330. And with those components, the potential to give a stack more. 500, 600, 800, these engines are pretty much bulletproof.
Which is just as well, because it's impossible to drive this thing without giving it death everywhere. You've got an 8,000 RPM red line on the rev counter, you've got a 300 km per hour, that's 186 mile an hour speedo, and the Nurs were the only ones to get that. And you've also got this amazing dash top multi-function display thing. I mean, remember how crazy this thing looked when we first saw it. You've got all sorts of stuff on there. Intake temperature, exhaust temperature, throttle, inject, boost. I mean, you couldn't possibly be looking at this stuff while making it do anything interesting. But it's kind of cool to have. Well, it feels like a really tight, it feels like a compact car, like a very small, nimble car. The steering's brilliant, it's so precise. You've got to be very careful pacing out on these roads. And it's such a shame because you want to really open it up. The RX-7 feels really light and flighty in the corners. This thing's not quite like that. It's heavier, but it's really secure. It feels absolutely unflappable. And you know you can put all that power down with the four-wheel drive system. It's a really different kind of driving experience. Can you say one's more fun than the other? Depends what you like, really. If you like your car slidey and rear-wheel drive, you're going to prefer the RX-7. But it's hard not to fall for this thing. Listen to it.
These cars feel so different, and which you prefer kind of depends on whether you've been bitten by the rotary bug and you love the Mazda's lightweight feel, or you want the GTR's epic traction and you like the idea of caning that unburstable RB26. The R34 is the obvious hero here, and this is an incredible car. But having had my eyes open to the RX-7 today, I reckon the FD is massively underappreciated and spectacular value.